You are listening to GeekFest Rants on the IC Robots Radio Network.
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man! Game over!
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all! So say we all!
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
We got ourselves an X-Men fan. Maybe a quarter of it happened, and not like this. In the real world, people die.
Logan.
I don't want to talk about it.
Logan. Just stop. Be careful. I need the girl.
What girl?
Go get her.
No. No.
And we're down.
She's like you. Very much like you.
I am not whatever it is you think I am.
She needs our help.
Someone will come along.
Someone has come along. This is what life looks like. People who love each other. A home. You should take a moment. Feel it. You still have time.
Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rant. My name is Carlos Perone, and today we are joined by Steve. He will help me go over a couple of films that we like to talk about. These are films that are really, really good films. Most of them are highly critically acclaimed movies. We each love these films. However, they are the type of films that, for one reason or another, we really don't want to kind of see again. These are good films that we just do not want to revisit. Do you guys have films like that? It's possible. So let's get started with good films that we do not want to see again. Today we're going to be examining a couple of films that Steve and I have been thinking about in terms of movies that are very good movies to us or to some people, I guess. I mean, we'll see how we each feel about these films. But these are films that we might feel that are kind of difficult to kind of watch it a second time, or it's, you have movies like your Star Wars films and stuff like that you can just watch it endlessly on a loop. But these are films that some people, us or other people, might have a really tough time, having to sit through it a second time. Not because they're bad, but just because some of them could be very uncomfortable, very depressing. It's those kind of films that we're hitting. So first of all, let me say hi to Steve for joining me. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Hey, Carlos. Hey, everyone. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, thanks for joining us once again. And yeah, when I remember when I mentioned this, I was like, okay, you figure out some films, and I'll go figure out some films. And it's funny because out of both of our lists, we have one movie that we have in common of the short list that we're thinking about. So why don't you start first off with one of yours, Steve?
Alrighty. Well, one of mine is actually a more recent film. It came out a few years ago, and now this film was very popular. It's highly praised as being one of the better comic book movies, and that movie is Logan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was surprised how much I not only enjoyed this movie, but how heavy hitting it really was. And this movie is it's definitely is a step above your normal, X-Men 3, action, packed popcorn movie where you can just toss on and, and sit back and watch. Logan, it hits you on a few deeper, more emotional levels, I'll say, and which is just a testament to the writing that was really shown here. And I think it's the fact that the subject matter that it sort of deals with, we see these characters that we're used to seeing in, the more Marvel movies where, they're more positive, it's fun, the characters here, there's nothing too serious or too, gritty about most of the Marvel movies. But with Logan, is there such a different take to it? It feels so different, and that the characters that we have, Charles Xavier and Wolverine, Logan, they're not the same characters we see in the original Marvel movies. They're in very different places at this point. So and it really puts you in a spot because you see Charles and you see Professor Xavier, you see him and he's he's basically like a shell of what he used to be, and he's this older, broken down, no longer lucid character that we all come to love, and it just really stuck with me. And also, I suppose this might have to do with the fact that I had to deal with things like dementia and Alzheimer's, in my own life, my own family. So that sort of put this much more weightier aspect on the film that might not come across to everyone who sees it, but for me, I guess it resonated so close to home that it's a movie that is phenomenal. If you watch from start to finish, I'm locked in. But it's not a movie where I would say, okay, I want to go back and I don't come home and say, after a long day's work, oh, I feel like putting on Logan. it's just not a movie you would really go back to, at least for myself. Well, I've seen it once. It hit me really hard. It's probably not something I would willingly put on in my spare time. I don't know if you have the same reaction to it, or
I love the film. I absolutely loved it when I saw it in the theater. I'm pretty sure I own it on Blu-ray, I think, and I might have seen it at least once more here at home. But yeah, I kind of like to think of this film as an alternate timeline. I don't like to think of it as this is what happens to these characters. This is the conclusion of these characters, because it is pretty depressing, how they kind of end up. Now, again, because I don't follow the comics, something tells me, yes, this is a different take on the story, and I'm sure it was probably rebooted 10 more times after these events. Is that what happens?
Yeah. There's a storyline called Old Man Logan, and it's sort of like an alternate, and you pretty much nailed this, pretty much like an alternate timeline. Right. Type of story. It's actually pretty good. It's actually written by Mark Millar, and he does excellent work.
Yeah, so you can't really, you really can't have a sequel to this movie directly the way that the movie is laid out. You have to kind of jump off to some kind of sci-fi twist that kind of brings most of these characters back into some shape or form. And obviously, there is another film coming. I don't know how they're working it time-wise. I think it takes place before this or something. Whatever the Dark Phoenix film that we're going to see, and then whatever the heck Marvel decides to do with the characters once they start integrating them into the MCU or however they're going to handle them. Obviously, they bought these characters to use, not so they can just die off on a previous film. So again, we're dealing in comic book world here, just like everybody who got upset at the end of Avengers. Oh my God, they killed everybody. Just calm down. Just relax. They're coming back. Don't worry. Might be different actors, but they are coming back. My first film is actually, it's actually two films. It's a film and then a remake of the film. The film that I'm talking about is called Oldboy, which was done by Spike Lee not too long ago, based on an original film by a Korean director, also by the same name, Oldboy. And this is kind of like if you remember the movie Snowpiercer, it's that same director, very popular director. I forget his name right now, but this was one of his big hits, and it's a kind of like a crime revenge film, which he's done many in the past. He's done a whole series of them, gangsters and mobsters and that kind of thing in the, set in Korea. But this one's about this guy who kind of loses his memory more or less, and he's in prison for years. But it's not a real prison. It's almost like an apartment. And he doesn't know why he's been imprisoned. And the whole movie is about him finding out, why he's been in prison all this time and what actually happened. And they do follow it pretty much the same, I think, on the remake. But this film has a twist ending that it just kind of freaks you out because you find out, and I'm not going to say what it is, you find out what is the relationship between this main character and this girl that is helping him kind of figure out who he is. And especially in the Korean version, it is so twisted that it's kind of like you love the film all the way up to this point, and then you're like, oh man, I really wish they wouldn't have done that ending. And I know part of it is probably it's a culture thing. It's a different type of, for our kind of films, we're heavily influenced, obviously, by British films and, Shakespearean type of stuff, the basic stories that we see all the time. But for Asian films, it's completely different. There's different tropes that we don't use that they use. And this one just kind of kicks you in the gut. And again, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but for viewers, that especially people that like foreign films, I went through this whole period of all the Asian action films, whether it's Taiwanese, Korean, Japanese stuff, Chinese stuff, you name it. And, all these different directors, especially in the 80s, they were super gigantic in the 80s when a lot of these countries, especially Chinese countries, Hong Kong cinema and that sort of thing, when they kind of transitioned from the old, like the Kung Fu theater style, and then they moved into modern, contemporary, more like gangster type of stuff. It was a switch. It's a completely different world, and this film kind of fits in that world, the gangster film, their version of the gangster film. So I'm gonna leave it at that. And again, it's a great film, and Spike Lee did a great job, with his remake. But still, that original one, man, was I not expecting that ending. It was just it was like, what the hell just happened kind of ending. Have you ever heard of this film?
Oh yeah. I've seen I've seen the original. And I haven't seen the Spike Lee remake actually. Okay. In fact. Until you mentioned it, I completely forgot they actually did remake it. Because I think the original stuck with me so much. I completely even forgot that he even made another one. But no, it is a really good movie. I think I've seen it twice, and it's very violent too.
Oh yeah, there's the hammer. There's that classic hammer scene which has been copied by other films way later, and the way that it was shot and the way that whole sequence goes, it's again one of these. It's like you've never seen something like that before, and it's like it happens all the time with a lot of these Asian films that all of a sudden somebody's like, holy crap, we need to do that, whatever that was, do it now. Let's copy it.
Exactly. And it's also one of those scenes where, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, you don't want to, you have to go through it. At least that one scene is really cool enough that you can kind of put it on and, and then, turn it off immediately afterward. But no, it is a very good film. But yeah, I get what you're talking about. It's not something I really want to, I've seen it once. I got the twist at the end. Okay, I'm good.
And it's like, okay, I don't get it. It's a culture thing. I don't get it, but okay, let's keep going. Let me just go back just a second here. That hammer fight scene, I believe that is something that was copied way later with, if you remember, Daredevil. Netflix's Daredevil, and then The Punisher. It's where they stage these very kinetic fights between one person and like 20 other people in a very narrow hallway, and how that action takes place in a very confined space where one person is able to take out a ton of people. That the first time I saw something like that was in Oldboy, I remember.
It's funny. Now I don't know what came first, Oldboy or the movie Kill Bill, because Kill Bill has a very, very similar scene at the end.
I'm pretty sure Oldboy is older, no pun intended. Let me just look here.
Yeah, no, you're probably
Oldboy
right.
is 2003. The director, by the way, his name is Park Chan-wook. And like I said, I've seen this name a million times. The guy, He's
also he has other big films in.
Oh yeah, he's done a ton of stuff. Like I said, he's done a ton of stuff. So what is it? What do you have? What do you have next?
Okay, my next movie I have is now this movie I literally have only seen this movie once, and again it's one of those movies where I saw it. I must have been maybe in grade school, well, like maybe middle school when I saw it. And the movie is it's the Civil War movie Glory.
Oh,
and this movie, if there's one movie that really sort of left an imprint on my mind, it was Glory. Because some of the opening scenes of this movie were just gruesome. I mean, the opening scene is one of the big battles, and they show like the regiments marching and the cannon fire going off, and you see one guy's head just explode from a cannonball.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so it's pretty brutal graphically, and then the subject matter of it is inherently very emotionally provocative.
The music is also fantastic.
Oh yes, the score is very. I always make the analogy that whenever you tear up, I have like the onions chopping, and so that movie. If I were to watch it again, I know for a fact the onions would be flying high. But it's and I know Matthew Broderick is in it, and Morgan Freeman, and I think there's a few other big name actors.
I think it's one of the breaking roles for Denzel Washington.
Oh, right. Denzel Washington isn't. Yes, right. That's right.
That's one of his big early roles, I think.
Yeah.
And I think, what's his name? Branagh. Was it Eric Branagh? No, not Eric. I forget that actor's name. He was also in it. There's another guy who's in it who's super, super famous now also. A lot of young actors, breaking into big-time filmmaking were in this film. Yeah.
And Cary Elwes was
That's
also...
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a great movie, and the ending of this movie is probably one of the most dramatic. The whole speech where Broderick gives, I believe his name is, I think Captain Shaw, I believe. He gives a speech about, if one man shall fall, and they're carrying, they're talking about carrying the American flag into combat, in the battle. And, and he's describing it, if he shall fall and drop the flag, who shall pick it up? And they go down the ranks of, volunteering to grab the flag, if it falls as they're storming the fortress there.
Uh-huh. And Denzel Washington's character is like the last guy you were going to expect to do that, and he does it. It's like, holy crap.
And then at the end is this beautiful shot of them finally getting through to the fortress, breaching the walls. There's a few of them left. The battle, the cannons going off everywhere. It's nighttime. It's really dreary, and then they come face to face with a group of the Confederates, and they have this cannon, and they fire, and then it fades to white. And after that, the icing on the cake is you see the Confederate flag still being raised above, So it's one of those movies that just it's like it doesn't stop. It's like all in the feels. It just hits you so hard, and it's a great movie.
The worst thing is that it's a true story, and that's what happened to those guys. And I think they even say it at the narration at the end that they wouldn't allow the commander to be buried with his soldiers because he was white, and they weren't going to bury a white commander with black soldiers. And it was like, talk about adding insult to injury to everything else. It's like, holy crap.
By the end of this movie, if you're not in tears, or if you're not feeling anything at all, you got to check your pulse.
Yeah, you feel exhausted. You feel tired after watching this.
Yep.
It's like,
it's not a short movie either. It's definitely one of the ones that you're gonna have to really invest in emotionally and time wise to get through.
Oh yeah. And again, I remember. I think I saw it when I was in college. I think, if I remember right, because that was back in my Laserdisc days. I might have even seen it in the theater. I'm not entirely sure, but again, for me, the music is it's haunting. It's just like, wow. It's such an emotional score to such an emotional story. The next one I'm going to bring up, which is the one we have in common from our list, is another one of these true stories that it's basically 2 hours of basically kicking you in the groin. Schindler's List. This is a movie that obviously, this is a big deal for Spielberg. This is the movie that he got made by agreeing to do. I think it was either Jurassic Park or the sequel to Jurassic Park or something like that. It was a deal that he made that if I make this big, blockbustery kind of fun movie for you guys, you'll let me do a black and white film about World War II. It's like, what? Black and white? Are you crazy? And again, we're dealing in this territory where it's another true story. And in a way, I mean, I don't want to say at least it has a good ending, because obviously nothing related to the Holocaust could be considered a good ending. But in this particular story, you're still dealing with being able to rescue or to protect a certain amount of people. But then still, by the time you get to the end, you realize it's a fraction of what could have been done, or it's just such a small amount of people compared to what was lost between the entire events of the war, having to do with all the Jews and the Russians and every, allies and just about everybody, the millions of people that get obliterated, and the hopelessness of it. That whole sequence, I'm sure you remember, where we actually see color. The little girl in the red dress that pops out of nowhere, and then I think she shows up in a ditch or something like that, and it's like, oh man, this is just. And, this is something that Spielberg has been able to do, and I don't know how he does it, but because he has such a huge reputation for being, a pop culture kind of director, whenever, or not, I'm not going to say whenever, sometimes when he does something very serious, he really does it super serious. The whole storming the beach scene from Saving Private Ryan, that entire beginning of that movie, I was gripping the seat in the movie theater. You didn't breathe for the first 30 minutes of the movie. Here, you're in a similar situation. And I remember there's a specific scene in this movie, which is the scene where I think all the German soldiers, the Nazis, are burning houses and destroying things at a specific night, and they're herding all the people into out of the ghettos into the camps. And it's just insane, the madness that you see done in this movie. And again, unfortunately, as much as I can appreciate this film, I do not want to go through that again. I'm aware of it. I know the historical references, but I just don't want to put myself through it.
Yeah.
What about you?
Same here. And there's a lot of this movie where I because I've only seen it once, I don't really remember all of it, but there's certain scenes that kind of stuck with me, and I remember a few of them. Well, obviously, the biggest is the little girl. That definitely is one that stands out the most.
Yeah, it's not gory or anything, but it's it just punches you. It's right in the gut. It gets you right in the gut.
The scene where I believe one of the German officers is like interrogating, or maybe not interrogating, but he has like he has one of the Jewish prisoners, on his knees, and he's about to execute him. Yeah, but his gun, I guess, the gun keeps jamming. So, and I guess because I saw this when I was younger, I was so tense watching this scene because the way it's done is he tries to cock the gun, the Luger, and he pulls the trigger, but nothing comes out, and he does this 4 or 5 times over and over and over again in rapid succession, and the gun never fires. But it's like that building up to it. It's like it just rattles you because you're expecting the gun to just fire, the guy's head gets blown off or something, but the build up to it and the fact that it never happens, it's just it's stuff like that. It's like it really stays with you.
And again, once you're dealing with something that's historically accurate in terms of it's based on a true story, it even hits you even harder. What's the next one on your list?
The next one is definitely ease off the gas here, because we had two in a row that were pretty heavy. This one is a science fiction movie actually called Event Horizon. Now it's not a terribly good movie, to be quite honest. I've seen it actually more than once, but I probably would, if I'm okay with never seeing it again, I'll be okay. But it's not the fact that because it's sort of mediocre. It's the fact that it's. And again, this is one of those movies where, I saw when I was younger. So, and I think that's a running theme for a lot of my movies. Or I've seen these movies when I was younger, so it sort of leaves this kind of bad taste in the mouth coming out of them. This one is a sort of science fiction, horror, where they sort of blend the two, where Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill. They are part of this ship called, the Lewis and Clark, and they find this old abandoned ship that's been missing for years and years called the Event Horizon. And they basically board it. They want to check it out, go on some sort of like either salvaging or rescuing it. And they board it, and they have they start each of the crew members. There's a whole bunch of them. There's maybe like 4 or 5 other crew members, and they begin to see that the whole crew on the Event Horizon was basically killed, and they were pretty brutally killed apparently. And so they begin, all of the crew members begin to have these really weird, trippy hallucinations, fever dream type premonitions really. And they realize that they're premonitions basically of other crew members and past, of their past secrets and lives and everything. Right. Yes, of course, naturally, one by one, the crew members start dying off, and they're pretty much massacred, all in different various, gory violence. And again, the movie's not terribly good. But I think because I saw it when I was younger, it left kind of this weird, feeling I had coming out of it. I was ugh. I probably wouldn't mind going back to seeing it again just once, or just to see, if I might, I guess, take to it a bit more. But for whatever reason, it just left kind of this really sour taste in my mouth. so sort of it's this disturbing type of feeling, which I don't know. It's never really got over. It actually reminds me also, now I'm thinking about it, reminds me of the movie The Sphere as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's sort of similar premise. I don't know if you've seen Event Horizon.
I have. I liked it. It was good. I mean, it's a good horror sci-fi. It's a subgenre, obviously, that comes up every now and then. The is it more horror? Is there more sci-fi? It's a combination of both. And yes, and this is one of these films that you don't get a completely happy ending, and it kind of, but which is also its own trope of horror. Horror, it's very popular with horror to have the little final second of the film, when you're feeling safe, all of a sudden you're not safe. It's still happening, whatever the heck it is that's happening. So yeah, it's kind of do I really want to go through this again for another hour and a half or 2 hours just to know that at the end I'm going to be disappointed again or not fulfilled, I guess. But that's just what happened. And that's one of the things I guess that a lot of these films have in common, is that the endings sometimes is the thing that kills us, when it comes to that film. The other one I'm going to mention, which is, I don't know, I guess you could call it sci-fi, because it's called The Road, based on a very popular book. It's one of these apocalyptic kind of films that something happened, that the world is turned to mush. Basically, everything is broken, and people, whoever's left alive, is kind of fending off for themselves, and they're kind of coming after each other. This was with Viggo Mortensen, which it came out a number of years ago. It was a somewhat of a, I don't want to say high-profile movie, but it was very eagerly awaited, I guess, because of the fact that the writer is the same guy who wrote No Country for Old Men. He also wrote this book that they turned into a film. And it's one of these stories, again, where you see this man and this boy, his son, they go through so much, and they escape, and they're able to survive and reach, I think they're trying to reach the West Coast or something, to see the ocean or something like that. And again, they go through hell and high water. And then by the end, you don't exactly get a satisfying, happy kind of ending. And I remember the book is pretty similar. It's just a gigantic downer. And it's wow, they were able to transfer the book so well from the written word to the screen. Cinematography is amazing. The actors are great, but it's man, I went through that whole thing just to feel horrible afterwards. And it's it's not a bad movie, because it's a very well-made movie and it's an entertaining movie. But by the time you get to the end, you're just exhausted, and you're just oh my God, somebody give me a Disney film now, because you need to kind of cleanse your palate after so much depressive, downer of a movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
No, this one I haven't even heard of, actually, until you brought it up.
Yeah, it's again, like I said, it's I remember, because I read the book, that I was really looking forward to it, and finally it came out and everything, and it's just, do you really want to go there? Basically, that's what you end up saying to yourself.
Now, is this post Lord of the Rings? Because you said Viggo Mortensen is in it. So okay.
Yes, this is post Lord of the Rings, definitely. What's your next movie?
My next movie is now. This one is going to be probably not on anyone's list of only wanting to see it once, but it's the movie The Shining, the original. And again, this one and I sound like a broken record here, but it just left such like a bad taste in my mouth, and it's just so eerie, and it's just so like the visual aspects of it, and like what's implied in some of the scenes is just so creepy, and really, I mean, now movies like The Exorcist, which I also saw when I was young, that didn't bother me. I had no. I watched that multiple times. I had no real issues with content like that. But I don't know. There's something about The Shining, and it's just I guess maybe some of the concepts of it it's also more subtle than The Exorcist. The Exorcist is right there in your face. Demons, angels. Go exorcise. The devil out of a little girl. Sure, but there's something that's more subtle about The Shining, where it comes off as far more creepy and disturbing to me. And there's just certain iconic scenes and imagery that come out of that movie that are just so like haunting that it just sort of stuck with me. I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to see this movie again. There's a great scene. Well, there's a few in the movie where I believe Wendy, the wife of Jack, is running through the halls of the hotel. And there's one scene where it's very quick, very, very like quickly shot scenes. And there's one scene where it's going through the different rooms, and it shows like two men, like one of them is dressed in a bear suit.
Oh yeah,
and the other guy's on the other guy's on his knees, and stuff like the other guy's on his knees. Sort of. You can infer, but it's stuff like that. It is done so quickly and so disturbing. And there's a whole bunch of these weird scenes, like the whole bathtub scene with the old lady. Some of it is just so bizarre, and it just really plays with your mind so much that it's just like, oh man. By the end of it, and then the ending itself, is that last image of the photo, as the camera zooms in, it's so haunting. It just stays with you. And I saw it once, and I'm like, wow. I was fascinated on one hand by what I just saw, and disturbed on the other by some of just the iconic scenes and imagery of the movie. It really affected me. I'll say that. And I don't think I was even that young when I first saw it.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know about you if you're a fan of The Shining or.
Oh, I absolutely love that film.
Oh no, yeah, it's great.
And for different reasons, and I don't mind. I've seen it so many times. I don't have that same reaction that I've had with some of these other films that I've been mentioning. And I think part of the reason why I like it so much, it's not so much the story. I think it's Kubrick. It's the director.
Yeah.
If you follow his film work and his genius, the different things he's done with all his different films. How he's able to kind of stay on a shot that on any other director would just be boring and uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable, but inappropriate. But he can stay on a static shot, and you start to feel anxious.
And
he makes you feel things without even doing anything.
Yes, exactly. It's
just incredible.
That's a perfect point, because the way I think there's one scene where Jack is at the bar. He's sitting. I think you know what I'm talking about. He's sitting in front of the older gentleman at the back.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But the camera lingers on him for longer than what a normal shot would be like.
Right, where another director would cut to the bartender or cut to something else or give you a long shot, give you a close up. No, he just locks the camera down, and he forces you to experience this thing, which is really nothing, but it just makes you all of a sudden feel something.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of shots like that in the movie where it's like the direction of the camera work just it literally forces you into feeling something. Like not a lot of movies can elicit emotions from just from putting a camera on a shot like that.
Yeah, and that's his thing. That's the cool. I can't credit Stephen King. Stephen King is probably my favorite writer, and I love the majority of his work, and I love this film. But the film is Kubrick. It's his style. I can't credit it as much as I love to credit King. To me, it's Kubrick, and that's what he's done in other films. He brings this other aura of something else that nobody else had been able to do before, except for him. I think the closest thing we might get to Kubrick, and I'm sure any film snobs out there are going to disagree with me, Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is probably another director that has a touch of Kubrick in him. He can visualize, he can design a scene, he can make it look pretty and everything, but he doesn't have that super talented manipulation that Kubrick can hold on his audience. And that's something that, again, if you look at his previous films all the way to the end, all the way to Eyes Wide Shut, I think that was his last film, he could still do that. He had that magic of letting forget about editing. Let the camera and let the design of your picture, however you design that picture, that speaks to you. And half the time, the actors aren't even speaking. It's completely quiet. And you're like, what's going on here? Why is there so much silence? And it's like, this is so weird. It's
not something we're used to seeing in movies. We're not used to seeing these lingering shots of silence. And that's why it brings that, and it's so like drawn out that you begin to feel like you said, like anxious, it brings out this like kind of like raw emotion, because you're not used to seeing this. This sort of camera work, and I think it's good that there's not a lot of people who can emulate that, or else I think it loses the effect of that type of filming.
Yeah, that for me again. That is one of my favorite ones. The last one I'm going to throw in here is a film that, again, depending on your particular religious upbringing, could be considered fiction or true. I'm talking about The Passion of the Christ. As a Christ story, I always liked, just in general for movies, when it comes to films for me, I like realism. I prefer gritty, realistic things. And with this particular film, I don't think they had ever done anything like this. Maybe The Last Temptation of Christ, the one Scorsese did many years before, maybe explored a little bit of this. In other words, trying to tell the Christ story from a different perspective, not the safe, everything's okay, the world is wonderful kind of perspective that you usually get that kind of a story. Everything is clean and fine and calm, and he took a little turn that pissed off a lot of people. And then with Passion of the Christ, which I think was directed by Mel Gibson, out of all people in the world, I think he was coming off some other films. This was a big hit for him, I remember. It was a big deal. And I enjoyed it in terms of, okay, they're telling you the Christ story, but they're not skipping anything. They're not alluding to anything. They're showing you everything. They're showing you every disgusting thing that was done to this man in every shape or form, and the suffering and the pain and every step of the way. It was super uncomfortable watching the film, and it was something that I was never able to experience before. Because again, before, normally the story will allude to these things, but they will never get that much visually detailed as to all these things that are happening. And one of the things I remember when I saw the movie, there was a lot of controversy around the time, because from what I remember, there was, as usual, political things happening surrounding the film. People that are very, very super religious, they were in, no pun intended, they were in heaven. They were loving the fact that they were showing all this, and it was a blockbuster movie, and it was making a ton of money, and it was getting a lot of publicity, and they were bringing in little kids into it, which made me feel so uncomfortable, because this movie was such a hard R-rated film. to me, bordering on NC-17, because again, you're talking about violence that is like horror movie and above kind of violence being portrayed. Now, I could accept it because as it being a historical film, they're showing you, okay, this is how this person suffered. I get it. But when people started bringing in little kids, and I think there were some little kids when I saw it, I was like, what the hell's wrong with these parents? You can't show them this. I don't care how religious you are. This is not for little kids. And again, for a historical perspective, if it happens to be your thing, if you happen to subscribe to that particular religious side, I think it was very accurate, or at least as accurate as I imagine it would have been, for that time, for that kind of environment, that they would do something like that to a person. But I never want to see it again. That's the problem. I do not want to go through that again because it's like root canal. It's like, wow, root canal was horrible. Okay, I never want to do it again. And this is how that, the movie was fantastically shot, and it tells the story cohesively, and you feel horrible for Christ, and you feel horrible for his mother, and you feel horrible for all these people that are witnessing this, and you're like, yeah, but that's it. I do not want to get near this ever again because it was such a strong, visceral type of movie. So again, is it because of the fact that it's historically possibly accurate? Maybe. Is it because of the overwhelming amount of gore that we get to see? I don't know. Maybe it was part of that. I don't know if they went overboard. Granted that Mel Gibson, after this movie, he kind of stayed on this kind of pattern. I think he had done, I think he did the Braveheart before this. So he was already on this mode of having a hero of your story, practically tortured to death, and it kind of became like his thing. So it's really weird how it kind of fits into that particular filmmaker's, phase of filmmaking. But this one is like, ooh, again, I can appreciate the hard work and how accurate I think they might have gotten the story and the events, but I do not want to touch anything near it ever again.
Yeah, the movie was pretty brutal. I haven't seen, I get to see all of it, from start to finish. But I've seen like a lot of the more gruesome aspects, scenes of it, and I hate to say that it falls under the shock value category, but it seems like a lot of I think if this movie weren't about the subject matter that it was about, I don't think this movie would have been I don't think it would have made such a big splash as it did. But I think that because it was about Christ and it was so religious, and doubling on the fact that it was so violent, that's why I think it really caused such a big controversy. And I don't think it helped that Mel Gibson he had this sort of controversy around him at the time as well. So
yeah, and he self-destructed not too long after this film. He just spiraled into obscurity. Ironically, he's climbing out of obscurity now, which is incredible, but it's like, yeah, that doesn't really help his case as a director or as a human being. But yeah, it was. But that's the thing. Like I said, if this movie hadn't shown those, the whole movie is building up to that, and that is the whole thing about the movie, is that you get to witness the end, the torture. You get to witness all these things. If it didn't have that, then it would be just probably another older Christ movie, where you kind of don't want to assault the audience with those kind of images.
Yeah.
But this one, it was like, okay, we're going to do something different. We're going to show you that stuff now. It's like, oh, okay, well, what's that about? And boom, it hits you like a freight train.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is where, not to branch off topic, but it's the same thing where I like horror movies. I have no problem with horror and gore. But it gets to the point where, do I really want to watch another human being, just suffering completely, nonstop? Like, I remember I was watching, and I don't want to compare the two movies at all here. I'm not comparing the two quality wise, but I was in the movie, that Human Centipede movie came out. I'm watching this, and I'm like, all this is just a movie about, how much torture can we put on another human being and watch them suffer through it. There's nothing entertaining to me. I mean, I like horror and I like, I don't mind gore, but it's to the point where you're sitting there looking at, okay, this is just human beings suffering. Why would I want to watch this?
Well, this is why I think it was around that time where you had movies like you said, like The Human Centipede, you had Hostel, you had Saw, the movies that were being characterized as torture porn. And they were kind of, and in a certain, for certain people, this movie was starting to cross the line into that. It was like, yes, you're giving people a historical film, but then you're piling on the violence over the top. Is it over the top because you're making it worse than it was, or is it over the top because you're actually seeing it for the first time? And that's where I kind of that's where I'm able to kind of say, because it's probably historically accurate, I can handle it as a viewer.
Right.
But I cannot accept somebody who wants to see this movie just for that scene, just because they're into, violent scenes. No, it's part of the story, so it fits the story, and it deserves to be seen because of that. But as opposed to a film that's about torturing people. This is the film. And again, and even when you start touching those other films, it could be a slippery slope too, because I've heard so many interviews where directors would say, well, this is just another type of horror film, and you can't just chalk it off as torture porn. It's not just that. And I agree. The first Saw film had a very smart premise. It was a very smart premise but unfortunately, just like anything else, when you start to smell a franchise, you're going to just repeat it, and make it bigger and gorier and more disgusting. And then you lose track.
Yep.
Yeah. You just go nuts. But a lot of these films, especially their original, their first attempt at making these, even the horror ones, they sometimes, not always, but they sometimes have a smart idea, a smart gimmick, if you will, that at least works for one film. Sometimes.
Yeah, and it's before, the studio says, oh, well, why don't we double down on this and make it, 10 times more.
Yeah, we'll do once a year. We'll pump out one every year and that kind of thing. But this has just been some of these films that we keep thinking about. I have others in the mix, and this doesn't even include the films that you watch and you just, not only do you just not like them, they are completely unacceptable and horrible. But we're not going in that direction. We're going at least into films that are actually good films, but they're just very difficult to watch a second time. And I'm sure we're going to run into more of these sooner or later, because these things happen sometimes.
Oh yeah, definitely. Again, it's not the fact that they're bad or anything. It's just this is like, no, they didn't overstay their welcome, but they probably won't be back on my my to-watch list anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, a similar example I would include films that I've never seen, that I don't want to see, not because they're not good films, it's just that I do not want to relive this yet. Anything having to do with 9/11. I know that United something, 90, I forget the name of that flight, they made a movie about it, and the movie apparently was fantastic, and it was very well done. I don't want to go in there. I do not want to see that. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, no, that falls into the category. It's just too soon. It's just...
Yeah. And unfortunately, these are films that are very good from what I understand. They're very well. But anyway, before we go completely off track as usual, I want to thank Steve for joining me. This was an interesting conversation. And again, this is one of those topics that it could continue. We could eventually at some point come back and add a couple more to this list.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it would my pleasure to come back. I can definitely probably think of a few more that I can definitely add to this list.
Great. Thanks, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Carlson. Take care, everyone.
All right, I hope everybody enjoyed today's show. As usual, I'd like to thank Steve for joining me today. Thank you guys. As I mentioned before, these type of films are the type of films that, they are really, really good, but, for one reason or another, you might not really want to, go down that route again. There are probably many, many more, and perhaps in the future we'll do another round like this of films that are good, but they're just a little too difficult, too emotionally draining sometimes to have to view a second time. So, on behalf of everybody here, thank you for listening, and we will see you soon here at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
I don't suppose they told you anything in Denver about the tragedy we had up here during the winter of 1970? I hired a man named Charles Grady as the winter caretaker. From what I've been told, he seemed like a completely normal individual. But at some point during the winter, he must have suffered some kind of a complete mental breakdown. He ran amok and killed his family with an axe.
Well, you can rest assured, Mr. Ullman, that's not going to happen with me.
That's right.
Mom, do you really want to go and live in that hotel for the winter?
Sure I do. It'll be lots of fun.
The only thing that can get a bit trying up here during the winter is the tremendous sense of isolation.
Is there something bad here?
I fear you will have to deal with this matter in the harshest possible way.
I believe that I killed you with Manny.
You did this to me, didn't you?
I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains. Here's Johnny.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perone, copyright 2019.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.